In this question, our ultimate goal is to fill in these tables with the missing values. The first step to doing that is to match up each one of these functions with the table. So you could do this a few different ways. You could start by graphing all these points on a coordinate system and then figure out if it's going to be linear, which is what f of x is it going to be quadratic, which is g of x, or is it going to be exponential, which is h of x. And that might take some time because you got to plot a bunch of points. Another way to do it is you could just go ahead and plug this function into a graphing calculator and then figure out which set of these points would match up with it. That would probably be a little bit quicker. However, the way that I think is quickest and most efficient is to find a common x value in each of these tables. So a common x value is 0 because we have it here, here, and here. And now what I'm going to do is plug in my input of 0 into this function and then figure out which output I'm going to get, or which y value I'm going to get. If it's 1, then I match up f of x with table A. If it's 5, that's what f of x is. If it's 15, then table C goes with f of x. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to evaluate f of x for 0, so I do f of 0, and I plug in my 0 for my x value. So I have negative 2 times 0 plus 5. If I simplify this, I'm going to get 5 because negative 2 times 0 is 0, and then plus 5 is 5. So if you look at table B, it's saying that when x is 0 right here, my y should be 5, so that you know that f of x matches up with table B. Now I'm going to do the same thing with g of x. I'm going to do g of 0, meaning my input is now 0. So I write negative 3, and then I plug in 0 for my x value. So it's going to be 0 minus 1 times 0 plus 5. And then I'm going to simplify everything here. Okay, I've got negative 3 in front, and then 0 minus 1 is going to be negative 1, and then 0 plus 5 is going to be 5. So negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3, times 5 is going to be 15. So when x is 0, my y should be 15, and that happens on table C. So it looks like g of x is going to match up with table C. And then that means that this one right here, h of x, has to be table A. And I'll go ahead and just do that to be thorough. I'm going to plug in 0 for h of x, and then 4 to the 0 power is going to be 1. We could verify that here in table A. Now what I'm going to do to find all these missing y values is just evaluate each of these functions for the given x value. So for example, this first one right here, when x is negative 1, we have to figure out what y is. So I'm going to plug that into h of x. So I'm going to evaluate h of negative 1. And all that means is that I have to plug in a negative 1 when I that x. So instead of doing 4 to the x power, I do 4 to the negative 1 power. And that's going to give me 0.25. So I'll plug that in right over this question mark. That's going to be 0.25. And I'm going to do the same thing for an input of 4 right here. So it looks like that's going to be 256, and I'm going to plug that in my table. So my question mark turns into 256. Moving on, I'm going to evaluate f of x here for negative 2 and negative 1. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, plus 5 is 9. So then I could plug in 9 right here for that question mark. And then I'll do f of negative 1. So negative 2 times negative 2, negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2, plus 5 is 7. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 7 over that question mark. And I go on to g of x in table C. So we have negative 3 in front, and then negative 2 minus 1 is a negative 3, and then negative 2 plus 5 is 3. So if I multiply from left to right, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, and then 9 times 3 is 27. So I could plug that into this table over the question mark. That's going to be 27. And then lastly, I'm going to do g of, looks like we need to evaluate for 4 down here on the bottom. Okay, so I plug in that. So I start off again with negative 3, and then 4 minus 1 is positive 3, and 4 plus 5 is going to be positive 9. So negative 3 times 3 is going to be negative 9, and then times a 9 is going to be negative 81. And I'm going to plug that in over this question mark. So because we did so much in this problem, I want to go over what happened. And the first thing we did was find the common x value to plug into the function. So that common value is 0. And we plug that into f of x, and we realized that f of x matched table B. And then we did that for the other functions. We matched up the other tables. And then we took the parts in the table with the question mark. So like, for example, we started off with this one, negative 1. We plugged that into our h of x to get our missing y value, which was 0.25, and then we finished up all the other areas with question marks too.